A 17-year-old girl fell more than 3 kilometers out of the sky, still strapped to her airplane seat. She hit the Amazon rainforest and survived. Then she woke up the next morning alone in one of the most dangerous places on Earth. And she walked out of it, 11 days later, on her own 2 feet. Her name was Juliane Koepcke, and the jungle that should have killed her turned out to be the one place on Earth she had been trained to survive. Let's talk about Juliane Koepcke for a second, because almost nothing about her survival should have been possible. It was Christmas Eve, 1971. Juliane was 17 years old, flying from Lima to Pucallpa in Peru with her mother. They were on an airline called Lanza, on a flight numbered 508, on their way to spend the holiday with their father. It should have been a short, simple trip. A young woman and her mother going home for Christmas. The kind of flight thousands of people take and never think about again. But here's what almost nobody knows about why she, of all the people on that plane, would be the one to live. Juliane was not an ordinary teenager. Her parents were both famous biologists, and they ran a research station deep in the Peruvian rainforest. She had spent part of her childhood out there, in the jungle, learning from her father how the forest actually worked, how to read it, how to move through it, and exactly what to do if she was ever lost inside it. She didn't know it yet, but every quiet lesson he had ever given her was about to become the only thing standing between her and death. And about half an hour into the flight, the sky turned against them. The plane flew straight into a violent thunderstorm. Black clouds swallowed the aircraft whole. It began to shake hard, thrown around by the storm, as lightning flashed white outside the windows. Passengers were terrified. Luggage tumbled from the overhead racks. People gripped their seats. And then, according to Juliane, a bolt of lightning struck the aircraft directly. The plane broke apart in midair, roughly 3 kilometers above the rainforest. And here is the moment that should have been the end of her story. Juliane was still buckled into her seat, in a row of 3 seats, when the cabin tore open around her and she was thrown out into the open sky. She was falling, spinning, still strapped to that row of seats, through thunder and rain, toward the dark green canopy far, far below. Out of the 92 people on that flight, Juliane Koepcke would be the only one to survive. She lost consciousness somewhere in the fall, and what happened next, she could never fully explain. She woke up the following morning, still strapped into her seat, lying on the floor of the rainforest. No one knows for certain how a fall like that can be survived. The best guesses point to the row of seats spinning like a helicopter blade and slowing her, and the thick canopy of the jungle breaking what should have been an unsurvivable impact. Whatever the reason, she was alive. And quick, if the fact that she survived that at all gives you chills, the like button genuinely helps. It tells YouTube to show this story to more people who'd want to hear it. Then let's keep going. But she was far from unhurt. She had a broken collarbone, a deep gash on one arm, a swollen eye, and a concussion that left her dazed for days. Her glasses were gone. She had lost one shoe, and she was completely alone, deep in the Amazon, with no idea where she was. And this is the exact moment her father's lessons saved her life. Lying there, hurt and half-blind, Juliane remembered something he had told her years before, in a jungle just like this one. If you are ever lost, he had said, find moving water. Follow a stream. A stream will lead you to a creek to a river, and a river, sooner or later, leads to people. So she found a small trickle of water, and she started to follow it. Hour after hour, she waded downstream, deeper and deeper into the forest, following the water as it grew from a trickle into a creek, and from a creek toward a river. But the jungle did not make it easy on her. She was barefoot on one foot, nearly blind without her glasses, badly injured and starving. She had almost nothing to eat. At one point, just a small bag of sweets she had found in the wreckage, rationed out over days. The water was full of stingrays and caimans, so she did exactly what her father had taught her. She walked in the middle of the river, where the dangerous animals were least likely to be. and the deep wound on her arm had become infested with maggots from the flies of the rainforest. For days, this was her entire life. Waiting, hurting, alone, and refusing to stop. And if this is the kind of true story you came here for, this channel is nothing but them, a new one here every couple of days. So subscribe and stay with her, because the hardest days were still ahead of her. Think about what that takes for a moment. A 17-year-old concussed and starving, who has just fallen out of the sky and lost her mother, deciding every single morning to stand up and keep walking through one of the deadliest environments on the planet. She passed the wreckage of the crash along the way. She kept moving past it. There was nothing else she could do, and she knew it. The only direction that meant anything was downstream, and the days began to blur together. Day after day, she followed the water. For days, 6, 8, the river grew wider beneath her, and still there was no one, no boats, no voices, no smoke, no sign that another human being existed anywhere in the world. Most people, by then, would have sat down and given up. Juliane kept following the water. And then there were the nights. When the light failed under that canopy, the jungle came alive with sound. Insects, unseen animals, the constant hum of a forest that never truly sleeps. She had no fire, no shelter, and no way to know what was moving in the dark around her. She simply waited for the light to come back. And when it did, she stood up and walked again. Hunger, infection, exhaustion, fear, any one of them on any one of those days could have ended it. Not one of them did. And then, after about 10 days, she found something that was not part of the jungle. On the riverbank, she came upon a small boat, tied up and resting in the mud. And near it, a shelter, a simple hut used by forest workers. Inside, there was a container of gasoline. Remembering yet another thing she had learned, she used that gasoline to clean out the infested wound on her arm and drive the maggots out. It was agony, but it worked. She was too weak to take the boat and travel on her own, and too honest to simply steal it. So she made a choice that says everything about her. She stayed. She waited by the hut for whoever owned it to come back. And the next day, they did. The forest workers who used that shelter returned and found a half-starved, injured teenage girl who had walked out a plane crash the entire country believed had no survivors. They gave her food. They treated her wounds as best they could. And then they took her by canoe on a journey of several hours down the river to a place where she could finally get real help and be flown out to a hospital. 11 days after she fell out of the sky, Juliane Koepcke was finally safe. So before the end, be honest with me, alone, starving, and hurt on day 8 with no sign of another human being anywhere. Would you have kept walking? Tell me in the comments. And the way her life continued is the part that ties the whole story together. Juliane recovered, and then she did something that tells you exactly who she had always been. She grew up and became a biologist, just like the parents who had raised her in that rainforest. She went back to the Amazon, not as a victim, but as a scientist. She studied the forest that had nearly killed her and then, in its own brutal way, kept her alive. Years later, she even returned to the very region where she had fallen to help tell the true story of that flight to the world. The jungle that swallowed an entire airliner and took everyone else on board had handed back a single 17-year-old girl, the one person who happened to know how to listen to it. And that is the strange, quiet heart of her story. Juliane Koepcke didn't survive because she was the strongest person on that plane or the luckiest one in the cabin. She survived a 3-kilometer fall and then 11 days alone in the Amazon because of a handful of calm lessons from her father that she had almost never expected to need. Find the water, walk the middle of the river, never stop moving. A teenage girl fell out of the sky into the deadliest forest on earth, and it turned out to be the one place she knew how to survive. That's real. If this story surprised you, the like button is right there. And if you want more stories that should be fiction but aren't, there's a new one here every couple of days. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next.